that. My name is Selena Pierman, and it's a pleasure to be invited to share a little bit of time with you today. I mentioned to a few of you early on, if you're having a deja vu experience, I was around last June. We did a session then, and it is great to be back with you today. I'm going to admit a few more folks into the session here. Oh, we're talking about change readiness and what each of us need to do professionally for ourselves as a team and as a team of teams, representing multiple organizations here today, what you need to do within the team of teams. What do we need to be thinking about, talking about? And so as we get started, I'll share with you just a titch of background in terms of why this topic is of interest, why I'm here passionately sharing this with you, right? And so I hail out of Waverly. I've got some Waverly folks around or within the region here. We have a small team here in Waverly working with all different types of organizations, all different kinds of needs and goals and missions. And those of you who hang around with me very long, you know, I'm absolutely fascinated with employee behavior, how we take all those personalities, characteristics, and traits in people and put them in small confined spaces and try to get some work done. And if anything, we have learned some things coming out of 2020. And wow, the learning is not stopping as we move into 2021. So today, the selection from the Education Committee was really thinking and helping put some tools in our toolbox about pivoting, about fast change. And you've lived this before 2020, right? 2020, just put a few exclamation points on it. So it's not a matter of, okay, what are some new things we need to learn? But I really want you focusing on today is what are some things we've maybe set aside, forgotten about, haven't been focused on as much? What is it for you? And there are some changes we like, right? Makes it a whole lot easier to adapt. And there are some changes that are like, really, if I just ignore this long enough, maybe it'll go away, right? So there's all different types of response to change. So we want to take a look at that today. And I'm going to hit it at 3 levels: individual level, team level, and organizational level. What do we need to do to be even more change ready to take on the challenges above in front of us? Because here's what we know. At the end of the day, our clients need us to.
Yeah, I think I did.
It is the purpose of our work. It is what we do. It is what we need to continue to do. And you're putting in a lot of work to it. So my job here is to celebrate that with you today, to continue to encourage you on that journey and support it with some tools. All right. So we've got some more folks logging in here. Large group today. I love it. Feel free, again, jump into the chat. We'll use that quite a bit today. And please feel free to drop notes in there. We'll continue to mute anybody who has got some background stuff going on. But wow, we're clearing over 80 people here right now. So thanks for taking the time out to join with us today. Jen Heidemann is in the chat as well, so she'll continue to help me out, I'm sure, with anything that comes up in the chat. We've got a few more folks joining in. I'm going to go to a screen share, and that'll just allow me to be able to share some things with you as we jump into this today. So our theme is pivoting, knowing how and when to change, because change hits us, right? The change hits us. We've just got to be able to adjust as we need to. And so let's take a look at what that brings for us with this. Here's what I want you to consider for just a few moments, right? What comes to mind when you hear the word change? We wrestled with this a little bit if you were with me in the June session, but I want you to consider as we frame up this conversation today, what you think of when you hear the word change. Something is different than it was before. Might be welcoming, might be frightening, might be interesting, might be a new opportunity, right? There's lots of ways we can describe what do you hear when it comes to the word change. So Angie jumped in. Angie, thanks for the comment in the chat room. Doing things differently, growing, right? So change offers us this opportunity. Many of us this year have had this experience of, well, didn't see that coming, right? And we ended up taking on some change we really didn't know coming. And now we've got some new experiences coming out of this. If I go to my definition that we framed the session around today of pivot, it's a central point, right? It's some sort of joint, if you will, in a mechanism, in machinery. It is something that allows us to change direction faster. And it has been used, I will say, in kind of the business or organizational world over the last few years, as we've got to be able to pivot quickly. And we experienced it, right? Middle of last March, when all of a sudden we had to do work very differently than we've ever done it before. Some of us experienced great pivot or great change, and some of us were like, not that big of a change. But we want to think about our agility today, or our adaptability. What have we learned out of these last year? And what do we need to do at an individual level, a team level, and an organizational level? Continue to make sure we are as change ready as possible. Because the predictions going forward is that this isn't going away, right? Not the COVID piece, but the rapid, relentless pace of change. So let's take a look at what that means. I've got 4 questions. There is an available download for you. Jan, if you can put the instructions in the chat room for me of how this is going to be made available to them, I'd appreciate that. But I've got 4 questions up for you on the screen. So there is a notes page that's being circulated by supervisors out into your areas to have some notes from today. If you're a writer, you can take some additional notes here. But here's what I want you to consider. 4 questions. Change is hardest for me when ... I like change that ... I can make this positive choice when I'm having a hard time with change at work. Change helps us do this at work better. What I want you just taking a quiet few moments. I get the fact that whether you're in the office or you're at home, there's lots of stuff going on around you. Today, we're just taking a timeout. Your biggest challenge for this hour is to forget about all the other things you would have been doing, because I know multitasking is really tempting. And so let's just take a quiet couple of minutes to consider these 4 prompts. How would you answer them? So change is hardest for me when I like change that. I can make this positive choice. Now, let me give you the full story on that one. It used to say I can make this choice when I'm having a hard time with change at work. And true story, I was getting lots of unhealthy coping mechanisms as answers. So, or less healthy, right? So we're going to go with positive choices we can make today. We're looking at healthier choices. We're looking at better practices. But just for a few minutes today, what I want you considering is that reflection of, what do you know about yourself? When are the times you adjust to change and it's great and you're moving ahead and you're excited about it? And what are those moments you're like, yeah, I don't have this one in me, or I'm struggling? And that's what we want to consider today, because there are changes that hit us revolutionary style, like boom, it's here, we don't have much choice. There are other change that hits us evolutionary style, where it's slow, sustained change over time. There are other changes that are more episodic, little chunks, and there are some that seem bigger and more transformational. So we see different types of change. So being able to pivot faster or pivot better or adjust to what we need to adjust to be that person, that leader, that professional you aim to be, is first even recognizing when this is easier and when this is harder. Think about the choices you make when you are having a hard time with change at work, because ultimately this helps us do this better. So consider for just a moment today, right, that question of, what do you need to understand about your own response to change? What types of change go better or worse for you? When are you more on board or less on board? In an organization, we can roll out an organizational change, and we're always going to have a group of people who just run with it. We wish we could clone them because they just get it and they run ahead, right? And then there are those of us in the middle. It takes us a little longer, but eventually we get there. And any change we roll out, here's the risk. There's always this other group of people. And if you've got your screen view up where you can see my PowerPoint and my waving the hands and talking with my hands, there's this other group of people over here. The cross my arms, nope, don't wanna, can't make me. Anyone know anybody like that? Please don't call them out in the chat right now. Okay, don't say hi and their name. But we've all known them, and we've all been that person. We've all been that person that says, nope, I don't have this one in me. So I really want you to consider today that individual response to change, what you continue to need to acknowledge for yourself, because we want to look at options. We all get stuck. We all have moments where we're like, nope, I don't want to. So the question is, what comes next? What are the things you can do for yourself and for your coworkers when you recognize that in them? So feel free, if you'd like, to drop an answer into the chat. Change is hard for me when, I like change that, choices you make, or how change helps you do this better. So if you want to drop a comment or to chat, I would love to see a few in there. Feel free to put your answer in there. Type it in. Hard when I have no warning, right? When it just hits, I didn't have time to prep. Now I just got to deal with it, especially if I don't have a choice and it's in my face, and that's hard. Feel free to drop a few more in there. I like change that, makes things easier for me, makes me happy. It's hard, right? When you're not sure what the outcome, hard when it goes against values. Absolutely. Change is hard for me when I don't know the reason, when I don't know the why, when I already feel overwhelmed, when I have no way to control or influence the change. Thank you for the comments. I like change that aligns, right? Back to that beliefs and values when it just seems to fit. And Christine, I love the note. Number one answer I usually get, I like change. It just makes my job easier. Let's just put it out there, right? That's just much better when it makes my job easier. I love it, right? I like a change that can make my job, right? Jenny, you jumped in on that one too. Just a little easier even. Doesn't even have to be big things. Just a little bit easier. It can be hard when I don't understand the why the change is being made or what the benefits are. I like change, see opportunities, right? Just some good things for us to increase that strategic development, but it's hard when it's hard and fast, right? And it's immediate, we don't have. But when I have input, right? Caitlin noted, when it seems like an obligation versus an opportunity, it makes it harder. It is nice when we see it allows for new systems and ideas. So part number one today, own it. You know, I work with a lot of organizations and I have a lot of conversations and listening to people. And I come back to a reflection that I think it's unrealistic that in our organizations, we aren't going to have some difficulties. There aren't going to be some days we're really frustrated at this. And so I am saying this, note this, to a group of helping professionals. Okay. Let's own it, folks. We got to get better at this. What do we need to do? We need to stop and say, yep, that frustrates me. Own it. Now, what do you want to do? The very advice we give to clients, right? No matter what your role is within the organizations represented here today, right? And I recognize not everybody is maybe directly facing with clients, but we tend to be drawn to organizations for this intent of being helpful to others, being resources for others, helping support other people along the journey. And here's what I love to remind us in all of the mission-focused work that all of you are doing, no matter what your role is, ultimately it's to support that role with services and clients. I'll often say, someone will say to me, oh, it ticked me off they made that change. Good, own it. Made you mad. Now, what do you want to do with it? Because the feelings are going to be there. The stories we tie to them about the change. And think about the stories we tell with change. I like this change. I don't like this change. I vent to 10 people. I vent to no one, right? The stories evolve over time. So we want to pay attention to that. By definition, just by looking at this today, right? And you are welcome to still continue to put things in the chat room. Change by definition is an altered state. Something is different now than it was before. Change management is a process in which organizations, teams, and team members move from current state to future state. So we recognize that change itself is an event. Here's what I love to point out in our teams. When we announce a change, effective Monday, XYZ, whatever change we're implementing. Well, Monday is the event. It's the process afterwards that's hard, right? It's a process. There's some planning. Even when immediate change happens, we still have to deploy. So the change hits, there's a process, and there's an execution of it. And so just even understanding your own response to this. Are we in the prep phase, the change event phase, or the reinforcement, the long-term after, right? But change management, we have to view as a process. Change is the event. It's making the announcement on Monday. The hard stuff is before and after that, of how we help other people through that change. So you are welcome. Thanks, Ron, for dropping. And I saw the link, Jan, for putting in there. So if people want access to that notes page. And so today I really want you to, and you can choose your own level. If you right now today need to go, I'm having a tough time with some stuff and you need to work on this for you, great. Maybe it's as a team. For the people you spend the most time with, maybe there's an upcoming change or one that you've been working on for a while that you need to navigate a little bit better together. Or maybe as an organization, maybe within your team of teams for the organization you're representing today, what does that look like? And how can we understand both change as an event? The change happens. We get a regulation change. We get a process change. We get an announcement, right? And that change hits. But we've also got to look at this as a process. How do we prepare? Even when the change hits and the email comes or the phone call comes, we've got a pause of some sort of preparation because it just hit. How do we deploy it? And then how do we follow up? So we're looking at this at 3 levels and 3 stages. So I want to start with some individual questions. And on the handout, you've got some empty space here. I've posed some questions here. So if you're a note taker, soak this up. If you're only looking for words, I also have words listed. So do I understand my own pattern of responses to change? So here, word number 1 is behavior. For us to pivot better, it comes back to that phrase, know thyself. What changes do you like? What changes do you not like? How do you view? What's your mindset or framework around dealing with change? Do I understand my pattern? And so this takes some digging deep. This takes some self-reflection to go, okay, so I do better with this, but I seem to resist this one a little bit more. Own it, right? Now, don't get stuck there because we have all had the risk of getting stuck. We've probably all known a coworker who got mad about something 10 years ago and stayed mad for like the last 10 years. Right? And it happens, and I'm not making light of it. We've all had our moments. The question is knowing your own pattern, because I am particularly interested in organizations and just how hurts happen, right? Stuff goes wrong, changes get made that we don't like, or we weren't informed of, or we didn't have some say in. And so we need to pay attention to our own patterns, especially in helping professions about how those impact. So this is a behavior piece. What's my behavior when it comes to change? Number 2, am I actively working my resources? Oh, for those of you in direct client contact, you work this stuff all the time, but as providers, we've got to ask ourselves, as professionals, again, no matter what your job title is, you got to know your resources. Who can help me through this change? And are they available when they're needed? So especially for leaders, and I'll always put the extra emphasis on, I'm going to hold leaders to a higher level of accountability on this, is that we've got to be working on relationships all the way along, building relationships all the way along so that when the change hits, we can leverage that relationship. Now, I don't mean that in some manipulative way. I mean that as for you to navigate the professional landscape these days, you've got to know who your contacts are. You've got to know who your resources are. You are, I know this work well enough. You have hit some professional levels of networking. You find resources, you make phone calls, you send emails, right? But what we're really thinking about is, do I actively know what my resources are when I'm having a tough time with the change? I'll always point out, right? We need people who we can vent to. So if I decide I'm gonna vent to Krista, right? And Krista, I come to vent to you and I go, you wouldn't believe what happened. And Krista's a really good listener. And I give her a clue, like, I don't need you to solve this for me. I just need 5 minutes. And now Krista knows what she's listening for, right? But if I say, hey, Krista, I need to vent, and then I really need to work on some solutions with this, but I need a 5-minute pity party, then I'll work on solutions, right? She already knows now what she's going to be listening for. But those relationships become really important. Of, do I have the resources? Do I have the people around me who can help me adjust to this change? First part is I got to know it. Second part is I have to wanna. And we all have that opportunity. I know I need to make this change. I just don't want to. Well, who are the people who can help me see it from a new perspective? Who are the people that can offer me maybe some advice, some encouragement? What is it that I need today? I might need some encouragement. I might need a good shove from behind saying, no, Danielle, you got this. You got this, and I'm behind you on it, and we're going to figure it out. Sometimes we need the encouragement. Sometimes we need the ear. But if we can pay a little bit more attention to what we need from each other. Do I ask questions and share information readily as the change arrives or develops? So here's our communications piece. I wish we could always explain the why. I wish we always had huge amount of information in front of us. I wish, but it's not reality. And so if we can at least understand what information we know, what information we need to share, what's the pace or the plan with the information we know and how we roll this out. But at the individual level, by the way, all of these apply at the team level and the organization level as well. What's our role of communication? What's the information we share? How often do we share it? When do people need updates? And I always go back. It's one of the mantras if you hang out with me for very long. In the absence of information, people make it up. In the absence of information, people make it up. So especially during really tough change, we need to be briefing more often. We need to make sure that we're giving people, especially as emotions hit differently, be able to see it, hear it, and put their hands on it. So that when they're home or you're processing something differently today than you were yesterday, you know what to refer to. Because I don't know about any of you, but I can make up a whole lot of stuff in my head, right? I can make that change way different than it is in reality. So I've got to own that. I need to make sure that if I'm venting about it, that if I am spinning, what I call spinning on it, my brain is 3 squirrels ahead of what I think about this change and where I'm at with this change. I need to go back to what is the information available on it? What do I know? And what do I need to pay attention to? You know, I think there's really something to be said for putting steps in place to help you get through difficulties or obstacles. Because you may be, right, if we think about pivoting and adjusting to change, knowing how and when to change, if I may be okay with it, but then we hit 3 obstacles and we're like, seriously, why does this have to be so stinking hard, right? And there's a momentum shift. It doesn't take very long in athletics to see momentum in games. Same kind of thing. You know, when a momentum shifts in a team in athletics, the winning team, the losing team, something shifts and an entire game change can happen of who ultimately becomes the winner because of a momentum shift. What I want you to be able to do is just be aware of what are some of those steps when you get stuck. How can you own it? Or do you have a buddy? So maybe Angie says to Danielle, hey, time out, you're stuck on this. What's going on, right? That you can have someone say and be open and honest with you so that you don't lose momentum. There has been an old adage on momentum for years, and it sounds like this: 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 1 step forward, and hopefully not 4 steps backwards, right? So what we really want to see, here's my keywords on this: progress over time. You're not going to do it in one fell swoop. In fact, if you've seen the memes and the postings out on the internet, on social media that said the path to success is not a straight line, it is lots of squiggly lines. And it kind of looks like once upon a time when my daughter was 3 making me fridge art, right? Don't tell her I said that, but you know, there may not have been a lot of design focus to it, right? Momentum. When you get stuck, how will you know it? When you get stuck, or when obstacles hit, or when plans change, how can you be situationally aware so that you can make the adjustment you need to? Number 5, have I taken the time to reflect and learn from past change to apply the lessons going forward? So think about what that means for just a moment. What have I learned? If you go to a classic definition of learning, it is changes in behavior over time. Now, there's lots of theories of learning. Many of you have studied theories of learning. How do we actually get change in behavior over time? So have I taken the time to reflect and learn from past change to apply the lessons going forward? Here's our challenge organizationally in teams with this. As soon as you finish one project and it gets rolled out, what happens? You're going to the next 10 things on your list, right? Because there's always something else to work on. Here's what we're seeing in organizations today. Because we have to move so quickly, our institutional history and knowledge is suffering. Not only do we certainly have rapid staffing changes, people more mobile, that stuff happens, but we get so quick to finish one project and go on to what's next. It's really hard to schedule a debrief. And so maybe that's one of your takeaways from today. Maybe you do debriefs in some areas of your work, and what that would look like is we finish a project, we get through a situation, we get through a major change, and we pull everybody around on a Zoom call or in person, however this works for you. And we say, folks, we're taking a half hour. What do we learn from this experience? What would we do differently? What do we need to document? I'll give you think about your own example. I'll give you one of mine. I was contacted by a former employer, and it had been some years, and I was still connected to them through some contract work. And one of the persons, I was involved in this major business. It was a significant process business change initiative. And I spent an entire year on rolling out this systems change. I lived it, I breathed it. And several years after, right, they called me up and said, hey, Selena, we're trying to remember, why did we make this decision? And for the life of me, could not come up with it. So any of us know, and we know this especially as we age, it's the tip of the tongue phenomena. When you go back into your memory bank and you're trying to come up with what it is, and it's sitting right there, but you can't quite recall it, right? And I'm on the phone call with this colleague of mine who I really wanted to be helpful to, and I wanted to be supportive of the organization. I went, I lived that for a year, and for the life of me, I cannot remember. And it wasn't even a specific question. It was like, why did we make this change? Because interestingly enough, and this is what's happening within organizations, 5 or 6 years later, they were about to reverse the entire thing and go back to a different process, right? How many times has that happened within our teams, right? Well, we do it this way for a while, and then we forget why we're doing it this way, and a new change comes through, so we go back and do it this way for a while. And then we're like, well, why did we make that change? I don't know. Do you remember? And people have changed and documentation's not there. Now, many of our systems have great documentation. It's not those. But there's something that happens with learning. When you pull a team together and just debrief it, and a lot of the research behind this says it doesn't have to be very long, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes. Now, of course, big projects, big initiatives, there's a lot more debrief we can do. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to lock it in your memory. You're trying to lock it in so later on when you need to recall it, it's there, or it's at least documented somewhere. Now, I also believe that there's a pendulum on this. We can't document everything because we never get any work done, right? But if we document too little, we don't have enough to make good decisions on. And we can't pivot as well on the change because we just have no data. So I really want us to find some better balance in the middle of how do we learn from this situation and cue it in our memory bank. And we know this about human memory is we need to cue it in our memory bank so that we can bring it up or extract it later to go, oh, I remember why we made that change. Now, certainly visuals help if we can document it with some other way, but that learning piece on how we pivot is really important. So let me pause for the moment. Look at those 5 questions. Our key takeaways. What's the behavior? What are my resources and relationships? Where does communication fit in here? How do I keep the momentum going? And what do I need to learn? This helps us view change as the process, right? This helps us understand that change readiness requires us to be on deck all the time. But yet, what is our opportunity to be situationally aware, to know that change is going to continue to hit us, but we can do this. We can work through it. We can choose the behaviors. We have resources and relationships in place. We have the communication mechanisms. We continue to improve. We know that there are momentum shifts and we need to pay attention to those, and that we're capable of learning this as an individual, as a team, and in our organizations. I'm going to pause there for a moment. It's always a challenge with a session like this with about somewhere around 90 of us on here, right? That so many of you. So I'm just going to invite, you are welcome to drop a note into the chat. If something just resonated with you, you can list it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is there something on there that speaks especially to you, of something you want to pay attention to? If you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat and I will be happy to respond to those as well. So just out of those 5 areas, either as an individual, a team, or an organization, which ones maybe are you doing well now? Which one might you need to pay attention a little bit more to? We'll just take a pause here because I know in your day-to-day work, there's not a lot of pause going on. So we have the opportunity in this even to take 30 seconds to go, deep breath, circle something, note something. If you're at your desk, grab a sticky note, put a sticky note in front of you of something you want to remember after the session today. Hey, Jan, thanks for the note, right? I've been caught forgetting, right? We forget to communicate change to those around me. We think they should know, or we've been working on it so hard that if, you know, and we've got to keep working at it, right? Lots of good comments coming in here. Reminder of progress over time, pause and reflect. There's an exercise called Tripwire that can be used in time management, but I'd expand it a little bit from there. Is the time management technique is at the top of each hour, stop for 60 seconds. Are you working on what's most important right now? Because I don't know about some of you, but I have a pretty strong squirrel brain where I can go in, you know, a lot of different directions. But that Tripwire technique, if I set an alarm at 5 minutes to every hour and just pause for a moment, am I working on what's going to provide the most value to my clients, to my customers, to my responsibilities, to whatever processes you are responsible for? So think about that. Think about that progress over time. You can do that on a weekly and a monthly basis. And here's what I love. It doesn't take hours. It doesn't take hours, but it's so easy to forget about. So I love that note on progress over time. Institutional knowledge is hard. And I see a couple of comments in the public and in the private comments coming into me. Knowledge is hard. It's suffering. And I hear that because of that rapid pace. So what I do believe is we've got to have strategic conversations about what are our knowledge pillars here? What are the things we absolutely have to start doing, stop doing, and continue to do? And how do we revisit that on a regular basis? Because we just get busy. Stuff happens. Struggling, right? So if we think about actively working relationships and resources, here's one technique. Let's talk about the how-to on this. I want you, and you can do this individually, team, or organizational level, depending on what you want to focus on. What are the top 5 relationships that are most critical for you? So what out of the relationships that you have to form, have to maintain? Now, certainly we can all do this on a personal level, right? In our personal lives. but consider what relationships are most important to you. And what have you done to cultivate those lately? And again, I always want us to use our powers for good, not evil. So this isn't manipulative, but this is relationships take effort. And it's really important that we put energy into relationships at work. We know this in our personal lives, right? We all know this in our personal lives, families, siblings, right? Other types of relationships in our life, good ones take work. So really consider, a lot of times if I'm coaching this one, I'll say top 3 people or top 5 people. It doesn't make them more important than other people, but what are the core relationships you need to invest some time in over the next weeks or month? And then make it genuine, right? Reach out to them in a way that's going to be genuine. Being able to ask questions, seek others' perspectives. I really appreciate the comments, especially coming in on number 3 there with communication, right? How do we share information? I'm a strong proponent for communication change communication plans when it comes to change. What do we need to communicate? How often do we need to communicate? Who's responsible for communicating it? Lots of resources out there to think about how to do that better. So, and that's one of the benefits from today, right? So as all 90 of us spend a little bit of quality time together here, you get to continue to count me in your network. So if there is something as we go into our last 20 minutes here, but if there is something from today's session that you want to know more about, that you are interested in some resources on, you will know how to find me, and you can always drop me a note and I will help you to the best of my ability, right? But I love that intentional pause. And I see a couple more comments coming in on that. Just taking that pause to say, what am I feeling? How is this impacting me? What's my best response? And we know just how important that is. If we look at some of those best practices when it comes to change readiness. So I love the phrase change readiness. It implies that we have to be on deck. We never quite know what's going to come through next, but we know something is. Of course, our schedules are going to change. Of course, someone's going to cancel something. Of course, there will be a new update on something. It's going to happen. But you have to know, and this is where I come back to priorities, where your time goes. You have to know what you can shift when something unexpected happens. And I'll just use, I spent some time with Eastern Iowa social workers, about 100 of them over time. And it was working with a group of social workers. And so one of the examples we were doing was, setting up your schedule for the week. You know what visits you need to make. You know what reports are due for which judges by which date, right? We have all those processes in place. I'm not speaking the technical terms, but many of you know them anyways. So you know your plan for the week and you know your plan for the month. Well, a lot of times it's so easy to go, everything changes. By the time I write up a plan, it's changed 3 times. Here's what I want you to think about. It's kind of like the adult game of Tetris. You have to know what you have to move in order to make things fit. So if you don't know what your key priorities are when it comes to that change, or what you can move around in your schedule to accommodate that change, you have to be situationally aware to constantly reprioritize. Because even when it's all urgent, you hang around me long enough, you hear this phrase, when everything is urgent, nothing is. When everything is urgent, nothing is. I still have to make decisions in myself, with my team, what comes next. Situationally aware so that we can make decisions about what the priority is. And so with those social workers, we did some work on, you got to map out your plan for the week. And even though it will change, you will know what you need to move, what your priority is. Because if you've got a report due, and yes, child removal is going to come up and stuff comes up in any of our professions, it changes our schedule and our priorities around, but we have to constantly reassess those. That is part of the change readiness. Feel free to drop a question in the chat as well. If there's something else on your mind that is jumping out at you that I can help with, please feel free to do that. So let's take a look at just some of the other best practices. These are some just additional notes I'm going to offer to you. If we think about the team and the organizational level, you're going to recognize these. These aren't listed in your handout. I will make a copy of the deck available to you as well. So if you're not a note taker and you want the list, it'll be available to you. Jan, I'll catch up with you on that. But what about the team and organizational? Because that last slide, right, was individuals. And even though a lot of that applies to the team and organizational level, here's our list of organizational effectiveness. team effectiveness. Anytime we can have clear definitions of goals and why, right? What are the success stories? So a lot of the work around Harvard Business Review on change management, a lot of the really good research out there really reminds us to check the stories we tell about change. So when you talk to a new candidate interviewing with your team, when you talk to other organizations about your organization, what stories do you tell? Oh, this was so hard. It was awful, right? Or that, hey, the story was, it was hard. And here's what we figured out. Here's what we learned. What are the stories? Sometimes they're called mental models. What are our success stories around when we navigated change well? We want to keep talking about focusing on learning. We want to keep building trust and relationships. We want to have open and ongoing dialogue. These are processes. We never arrive. We keep trying to get better. We want to show active listening. We want to keep working on increased teamwork. We want to continue to promote healthy conflict. We want to talk about addressing obstacles together. We need to celebrate some milestones. I was working with an accounting department not too long ago that was doing a major enterprise-wide system change. And the accounting finance folks were like, we just want to close out month end on time, right? Because when they had implemented the computer system, they were 4 weeks behind, and then they were 3 weeks behind. I said, good. So the first time they were 4 weeks behind after the implementation change. It took them a whole month to get caught up, right? I'm like, good, have a party. The next week it was 3 weeks, or the next month it was 3 weeks. I'm like, celebrate 3 weeks. You made progress. Yeah, but we're still late. You made progress. It's moving in the right direction. So celebrating milestones don't just have to be big things. More planning. A lot of times we need a little extra time. One of my favorite fun facts out there, based on some research, it said for every 60 seconds of planning, 60 seconds, you save yourselves 3 minutes of chasing it down later. 60 seconds for 3 minutes. I know there are a number of you today that could use a net gain of 2 in your day, right? If you just had an extra 2 minutes. So more planning. It doesn't take hours, but sometimes it does take a few minutes. Now, certainly big problems, big challenges, big projects take more time, but don't underestimate a pause. Don't underestimate how powerful a couple of minutes of, you know what, for 5 minutes, I am just focusing on this. There is a great book out. I don't get royalties for selling his book, called Deep Work by Cal Newport. And Cal talks about what is kind of surface work, stuff we can just easily do that doesn't require lots of deep thinking. But then what does it require out of our brain to do deeper work, and how we can help each other out. Because if Amanda really has to dig in on work on something really significant, right? Then what can Jenny do to help Amanda? So, hey, Amanda, I know you need some scheduled time. How can I help you with that? So we just know different kind of work requires different amounts of deep work, and often that's planning for it. And then even today, even you taking this hour out, right? We've got to keep skill building and learning. I ran across an example one day that said, why in the world do we teach Venn diagrams to first graders and seventh graders and college students? And then somebody puts it up on a conference room's, easel pad of a Venn diagram. Well, because I knew what a Venn diagram was. But what was really interesting to me in the response was because we process it different ways at different times. When you're a first grader, you process a Venn diagram very differently than a seventh grader, very differently than a 35-year-old. And so I really want you to, as simple as that example sounds, we process things differently based on the time and space we're in, based on what's important to us right now. So even for any professional development, right? An hour like this, other opportunities that you have, you process different parts of it different ways because of what's going on right now. Again, being able to pivot to change how we do it better individually, as a team, and as an organization. The team and organization ones, we know these things. The question is, what are those steps we can put together to put it in place? So feel free again to jump in the chat with questions. Let's hit it with a couple of summary pieces that are on the back side of your handout. true story. I was sitting with a company president not too long ago, and he gets my weird sense of humor and he shares it. And he looked at me and he said, Selena, remind me again why I pay you to come in here and tell me things I already know. And I said, cuz you like keeping our small boat afloat. I appreciate that. But really the reason is because we all need reminders, right? He was saying it with some humor and some sarcasm in his voice of, I know this stuff already. Why the heck do you have to remind me? Because we all need it. Even myself. Okay. So usually now that we have all this office time and I'm not in person with you eating really good food today and us having a in-person celebration, man, I miss those, right? My staff, I'll get off the call today and my staff will say, hey, Selena, you know that comment you made to that group? We should really work on it here too, right? Because we all need those reminders. So we know the choice of change readiness is a mindset. So how we receive change, checking when we get stuck and when we go negative. So maintaining that positive attitude, knowing that change in our field, change in our work is going to remain constant. In fact, I'm using the word more relentless of it is not going to stop. I was with a hospital group not too long ago. Actually, it was pre-COVID. And I had someone say to me, you know, the proverb or the saying, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm like, yeah, I know the saying. She goes, I think we're on our 7th shoe this month. Okay. So you might have 7 shoes this month. You might have had 7 shoes today, but with some humor, right? It's going to be constant. So we need to steady ourselves against that. Stay connected. It is especially important right now where we're feeling more detached. So really pay attention to who are those people you need to work on those relationships to. Schedule a 15-minute chat on Zoom. It doesn't have to be an hour because our calendar says it has to be an hour. 15 minutes could do it. Being optimistic, even if you're not feeling currently happy. So I am not one that says tell you to smile. Now, I do believe that the presence we bring, right, owns the moment. So if you're feeling down, if you're feeling frustrated, it is finding those things that we can look forward to. There's a mental mind shift that happens. I am a big one on self-reflection. For us to steal, and I mean it in terms of building a foundation to protect and respond to change well, right? We've got to self-reflect. We've got to learn some new skills. We need to ask questions and write down the answers because our brains don't always process answers well, especially with high intense emotion. So maybe that's for you, right? Maybe a date on your whiteboard, maybe a sticky note in front of you, maybe a reminder. Because when you've asked questions and you've gotten an answer, sometimes we don't always recognize the significance of that answer in the moment. And there's just such a great opportunity to look for ways to help others cope through change. If somebody else has gotten stuck, be a good listener to them. If somebody else is struggling with a change or being ready for this next change or going through the change itself, ask them clarifying questions. So what have you learned? What's your next step? Who can you access for resources? Turning some of the things we've already talked about today into those questions so you can be supportive of someone else. We know that this has been a unique and unusual year and a really weird one for self-care, right? Different pressures on us, different patterns. And I have to, given the opportunity and audience, thanks to your education committee and the folks that went to planning today's session, to speak to self-care for just a moment, because you can be change ready, but that takes energy. And going back to I think we're on our 7th shoe. When we followed up on that conversation and she and I talked, she was exhausted. And we're starting to hit some new levels of exhaustion in our organizations. And I've wrestled with this from an organizational psychologist standpoint as I look at companies, as I look at all different kinds of teams right now. And you can certainly see lots of examples in our wider society and culture where people are just tired. All right, already, get this over with. I want to go back. And we know we're not. Whatever emerges out of this will be completely different than it was prior to March of 2020. So maybe today for you, it's not taking on the rest of the world on that right now. Maybe for you, it's just revisiting, knowing who you are and what limits you have. What are you just able to do and not able to do right now? What we also know is we are not emotionally ready to deal with change when we have not slept. Now, we always want to find that balance point. I don't want you sleeping too much, but I want you getting good, healthy sleep. And when I work with someone, if I've been called in to work with someone who's struggling, oftentimes in my first set of questions is a question somewhere around, are you getting good sleep? I do believe that there are times in life when we're not getting good sleep. Might be four-legged creatures, might be two-legged creatures, might be aging parents, might be, all sorts of finance, health concerns. But if there's something you need to do to get support for good sleep, the rest of this comes better. We also know, right, when we're moving and when we're fueling better, we're sleeping better. And as helping professionals, no matter what role you're in, we've got to remember what I feed myself and when I move myself and when I get good sleep, all of those things help me be ready for what comes next. There is something also to be said for decompressing during the day. So some of us, it's, if you're at home and you're not leaving your space, it might be walking around the house or walking around the block. It might be taking mini breaks just to find ways to decompress during the day. A lot of times we built it up for the end of the day. And what we just see is that is not always as effective. For many years in professional work, we said, hey, at the end of your day on your drive home, or maybe you've got an arrangement with your spouse or your partner, that roommate, family, that when you get home, you talk about something for 10 minutes and then you let it go. But think about it as like a relief valve all day long. If you can find some other ways to decompress, so those of you can take a walk at lunch, see something different than the space you're in, whether you're in the office or you're at home, find little ways to decompress during the day so that at the end of your day, whatever time that is, you don't have all of it to do. Think about maybe where that helps today. And, sometimes we just need some reflection time, whether that's writing it out, whether it's thinking it out, whatever you do for you, to be able to give some thought to maybe a difficult situation you're running into and who might be able to help you with it. We know how important it is that during times of self-care, right, to be kind for yourself, to find a way to release that stress, to take some small steps to reassess your values, to look at your routine, to understand your level of control, to check your thought patterns, and to be present in the moment. So we're going to do a collective 90-person self-care fest in the chat room right now. So I want you to put a note into the chat room. What are you doing for you? Now, remember, this is not, and I know popular media would say this is back rubs and this is wine. Those can be good things. So if you're about to put those in the chat room, that's okay. But there are so many things that we can do. Call a friend, fully disconnect. So we've got to watch our timetables. I am finding more and more people, and I know I'm happier when I don't look at my phone in the morning. When not all morning, but when I first get up in the morning, right? If I'm on Facebook, on social media, if I'm checking email and I'm still laying in bed, I'm always happier when I don't do it. So think about your stuff. Look at the list coming through here, right? No phones at the dinner table. Go for a walk. I see a couple of notes about take your break. Get away from your space at lunch. There's great research that points to the fact how, okay, I'm betting out of the 90-ish on here today, a significant number of you might eat lunch at your desk. You might just, right? Okay, some nonverbals from all the people with their cameras on. Here's what I want you to thinking. The research says in as little as 10 minutes, if you get up from your desk, wherever you're at, walk somewhere else. So bonus points for seeing something in Mother Nature, white or green, depending on what time of the year it is. When you get up from your space in as little as 10 minutes, go rewire your brain, even if you're getting something to eat, and come back. You actually come back more productive than had you stayed that 10 minutes. 20 minutes, 30 minutes, it just multiplies. But we think we're being more efficient, right, folks? We're being more efficient. We're going to eat and work all at the same time. But the research is solid. We get up, we leave, we come back, we're more productive than had we just stayed to work. I love the other comments, right? Crafts, calling a friend, binging on Netflix, drinking water. Yes, we're needing more and more of that. I think there's something that's physiological, not my area of expertise, but given the change in just everything right now and mask wearing and dry weather in winter, we need more water. Yoga is what I've been working on. I see the yoga on the list there. I'm a 3-year yoga practitioner, mostly for my squirrel brain. And between yoga and meditation and self-awareness. So if that's your thing, right? Lots of really good ideas there. Here's what I want you to consider, right? What do you do with this? So we've all known, whether it's been conferences, whether it's been webinars you've been listening to, whether it's training sessions, it's what you do with it next. After the session is done, that makes the biggest difference. So what you walk away with, right? What you do next. So I'm going to challenge you, commit to something, starting something, stopping something, continuing a best practice. Every time we show up, we have an opportunity to take something away and say, here's how I'm going to make an impact with it. Here's how I'm going to make a difference. Thank you all for your time and attention today. Let me give a couple of things. We're going to follow up with the recording. So if there's something helpful for you in this today, you'll have access to that. I will share some exciting news in my world. We launched a podcast 2 weeks ago out of my office. So it sounds a lot like our hour-long session today. So if you're a podcaster or if you need a little bit of boost, this is one way that I can help do that. So workplacechameleon.com. You can also find it linked off of our website. And I just share that with you because for all the work you do, for all the people you care about is nearest and dearest to my heart. So thank you for the work you do. Please keep taking care of yourself. And folks, we can do this. We got more change coming at us. We can make this happen. So thanks for doing everything you can do. All right. Give a shout out in the chat message if you would like. Say hello to somebody, greetings to someone. Drop us a note and I will see you again. Take care and be well. Thank you all. My pleasure. Thanks, everyone. I love the waves. We never used to wave, but we're going to keep the wave after all the Zoom stuff is done, right? Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye, everyone. Stick around if you want to talk about questions. Happy to stick around too. Drop me a note.